Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing the warp entities or gods of the 40k empires. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe. So you have been warned. And with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, the relationship between the galaxy and the Immaterium has been integral to the 40k universe from the very beginning. The age-long war of the Emperor versus the gods of chaos is the very fabric and foundation of the setting. And we, as I often say, are currently living in a golden age of lore, seeing these legendary, mythical names actually acting across the galaxy. When I first got into the hobby as a kid back in the 90s, never in my wildest dreams did I think I would see the Emperor going against the ruinous powers. The War of the Gods, as I like to call it, has well and truly arrived. However, for all the attention and spotlight the God Emperor and ruinous powers receive, and to be fair, rightly so, I thought it'd be good to go over every faction's psychic presence within the warp, or their gods if you will, because virtually every faction out there does have a power in their corner. So, let's begin with the obvious, the immortal God Emperor. The debate over the Emperor's divinity has raged ever since he first emerged to lead his race. The master of mankind was a being of impossible psychic power, easily the greatest psyker to ever bestride the stars. With that in mind, it's understandable why people would claim him a god. Indeed, to the Mechanicum, he is the Omnissiah, the physical representation of the machine god. Despite this, the Emperor's quest was to rid humanity of faith, to place their hopes into science. Together with claiming the webway, ridding mankind's reliance on warp travel, he hoped to sever their ties to the warp, shepherding his people into their evolution as a truly psychic race. As it was, we know this would fail. And with the Emperor's sacrifice upon the Golden Throne, worship and faith in him would spread across the Imperium like wildfire. The Ecclesiarchy would go on to dominate the future of the Imperium. This worship, this faith, of the entire race of mankind would seemingly empower the Emperor within the Immaterium, ascending him to godhood, a being of power akin to the ruinous powers. With the fall of Cadia, the flood of the Great Rift, it has led us to the point we are now, with the rapid increase in psychic activity enabling the Emperor to truly begin taking the fight back to the enemy. The fight for the galaxy's survival is on like never before. Opposing him, of course, is the ruinous powers, the gods of chaos, beings created and fueled by emotions of life within the galaxy. Khorne the blood god, fired by anger, rage and violence. Tzeentch the schemer, the architect of fate and the changer of ways. Nurgle is the patron of disease and decay. And then finally Slaanesh, hungering for lust, perfection and all its excesses. The gods of chaos are entirely dependent on the lives of mortals. As such, they seek to bring ever more of the galaxy beneath their sway. Khorne into war and bloodshed. Nurgle a galactic garden of pestilence, death and rebirth. Such is the nature of chaos, they spend most of their time fighting amongst themselves, their conflict known as the Eternal Great Game. However, the one figure they have equally feared enough to unite against is the Emperor of Mankind. Abaddon the Despoiler has cleaved the galaxy asunder, denying the cause of the ruinous powers thus far. But it's clear the gods are assaulting the galaxy in ever-increasing numbers, and footholds and empires are being claimed in their name each and every day. With Khorne's most recent action fueling his power through the champion Angron, it appears the gods of chaos are making a push, a show of force, not seen since the darkest days of the heresy, if even then. Regardless of the involvement of the other races, the galaxy's fate will be defined by the God Emperor of Mankind versus the ruinous powers conflict. Now, with the two major players out of the way, who are the other players out there? Who else could have a major impact? Well, before we move on to another faction, it is worth mentioning there are countless minor gods of chaos out there as well, all of varying degrees of might. Vashtor the Archiphane is a good example, a demigod who is right now seeking his evolution and ascension to the Pantheon himself, becoming a full-on major god of chaos. Whether he succeeds or not, only time will tell. It's actually one of the great aspects of the lore, the possibility of any unknown god making their play for power. With the nature of the Immaterium, of chaos, who knows how many unseen powers are poised to emerge. Moving on, the collective psychic imprint of the Greenskins has formed the twin gods of Gulk and Mork. One famously brutal but cunning, and the other cunningly brutal. The Orcs traditionally don't exactly operate on galactic-wide schemes. Theirs is a culture immersed and created for war. They want to fight. They exist for it. The bigger the scrap, the better. They don't usually look beyond that. If there's no one else to fight, they'll fight each other. As such, you'd really expect their gods to operate in very much the same way. If there's any involvement of them within the Immaterium conflict, or appearance of actions in the galaxy, you'd expect it to be forceful and destructive. Very destructive. Now, for all that said, however, their self-proclaimed prophet Ghazghkull Thraka is on course to unite more greenskins than any other of his race, and is far more logical and, dare I say, smarter than any other war boss. If the gods do truly have a plan for their race, it most certainly is being enacted by Ghazghkull Thraka, whether he realizes it or not. With every warband and clan Ghazghkull brings beneath his banner, with every new war boss that sails to join his fight, perhaps we get one step closer to seeing an appearance from the twin Orc deities. Next we have the Tyranids. Now, the Tyranids have long been ruled out of any discussions such as this, with their collective psyche simply forming the hive mind, an instinctual, overwhelming animal desire, the one objective of their race, to feed. However, there has been a little evolution of this. While the hive mind does still emanate the shadow in the warp, the complete blacking out of all psychic communication and warp travel, it does appear to be in some way a conscious warp entity, as of the novel Darkness in the Blood. And we know, thanks to this Blood Angel series as a whole, the Tyranids chose to head for the Blood Angel's homeworld, They wanted to eradicate the Blood Angels chapter, and they even uncharacteristically ruin and target Blood Angels monuments when they find them. How much this could play out within the hive mind, who knows? But in a race famous for its adaptations and evolutions to threats, could it be the hive mind itself has evolved? I think it's worth considering, and maybe we'll discuss that next week somewhat, as they're certainly acting more characterful, let's say, than we've ever seen the hive mind do before. Next we have the Eldari. Now the Eldar lost most of their gods with the fall of their empire. The birth of Slaanesh saw the emergent chaos god devour most of the Eldari pantheon. Only 3 Eldari gods survived. The god Cain, very similar to Khorne, as a god of murder, violence and war, was shattered into pieces during his fight against Slaanesh, and the shards of his being became the avatars of Cain, which reside at the heart of each craft world. Aisha, the goddess of life and healing, was at first captured by the new chaos god Slaanesh. However, her cries for aid were answered by Nurgle of all beings. In going to war against his new fellow chaos god, Nurgle eventually won and took Aisha as prisoner for himself, keeping her locked away within his garden, where we believe she remains to this day. Though I've still got feelings we might get a little tease or evolution of this soon. But regardless, that's where Aisha remains at present, at least as far as we know. Lastly, there is Kegarak, the Laughing God, the patron of the Harlequins. Kegarak hid within the webway during Slaanesh's arrival, and is believed to remain there still. He, of all the remaining Eldari pantheon, is still a guiding hand through the actions of the enigmatic Harlequins. With Cain shattered, Aisha imprisoned, and Kegarak within the webway, the ancient Eldari gods have not and do not play much of a part in the current goings-on within the Immaterium. Should Aisha escape or Kegarak finally emerge from hiding, things could obviously change. But at present the Eldari pantheon is truly a thing of the past. Now there is of course one exception, the new awakening god of Ennead. Ennead is the Eldari god of the dead, one prophesies to defeat Slaanesh upon its own true birth, and with the appearance of its avatar, Ennead is now awakening. If the Eldari are to have any major presence within the warp, Ennead is their best hope. With the god in the process of awakening, maybe we could begin to see events and actions taking place within the Immaterium and without. When a god stirs, there surely must be repercussions, and Ennead's story has truly just begun. Ironically, the Eldari god of the dead could be their key to life. Next we have the Tau Empire. The Tau are a largely unpsychic race. Their souls flare in the warp vastly lesser than most other races. It takes several thousand Tau souls to match the psychic core of a single human, let alone an Eldari. And that, combined with their worship of the greater good, an ideology over an individual, would explain why there is no deity or presence for the faction within the Immaterium. But, and there's always a but, that appears to no longer be the case. From the Space Marine conquest novel War of Secrets, there was a very intriguing revelation. a revelation that there could well be a Tau god emerging. During the 4th expansion fleet's travels, it became trapped within the warp, and as such swiftly became assaulted by demons, clawing and hacking against the vessel's shell to get in. However, it appears the Tau fleet was then saved by a Tau god of sorts. The description given is, "It had many arms, I think. Some of those were made to nurture, or to provide, others to destroy. In physique it was familiar to us, for it was built much like a member of the Orn, though in retrospect it was bulkier, and many of its hands had 5 digits, as if the notion of human beauty had mingled with the optimal form of the Tau." Now, we'll dive into this more in depth another day, but it certainly appears a Tau god has been birthed within the warp. Considering the Tau's soullessness, for want of a better description, and the large populations of humanity now within their empire, following the greater good. From this description of Tau features merged with human, it seems the greater good followers of humanity have either birthed this god, or empowered the Tau belief enough to enable its rise. I found it strangely calming to behold, Master, but I also felt its hunger to grow, to spread its many limbs from the tip of one of the galaxy's spiral arm to the other, to remake everything in its own image. I remember feeling that, and then like it peered directly into my soul. Now this being then creates a tunnel for the Tau fleet to escape. The conclusion these Tau come to is that the humans and other races following the greater good have inadvertently created a greater good god by worshipping the ideal, the philosophy, and it certainly appears that way. Now, the result of that is that they decide the Tau can't have allies, that the Empire should eradicate all humans and other allies alike, which as of yet is not countenanced by the Empire at large. Since then, no other appearance or mention of this god has emerged, at least that I've seen, but it seems likely it is still within the Immaterium. Is it on the same playing field as the ruinous powers or the Emperor? Most likely not. However, it is certainly growing, and I have no doubt we will see this greater good god again. And so that's largely it. The Necrons of course are no longer biological, incapable of psychic activity or possessing souls. The Leagues of Votan aren't a faith-minded species, worshipping more instead their ancestor cause. Overall, most factions do in some way or another have a deity or god within the Immaterium. And it's not a reach to say for me that this realm is really the spiritual battle of the galaxy. While it may presently be dominated by the ruinous powers, their fight against the God Emperor of mankind, as we have seen, there are far more players ready to enter the battle. The question is when, or who, will it be? But as always everyone, what do you think? Which of the warp entities or gods are you hoping or expecting to see? And what is your opinion of the so-called Tau god? Was it a formation of the greater good belief, or was it something entirely different? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. With that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.